At 9:30 this morning we've plotted our position here. You can see we've written the time and we've also written the log reading of 1.3 nautical miles. We'd like to travel to this waypoint we've already marked on the chart here. Now one approach to this would be to measure the angle on the chart, allow for variation and point our boat in that direction. Now one thing that doesn't allow for is tide. So for example, if the tide was pushing this way, we might point that way, but we would probably end up somewhere down here. If the tide was going this way, we'd end up somewhere down here, regardless of the fact we're pointing in that way. The method we use to allow for tide is called course to steer. The first step of that process is to simply draw a line from our current position through the position we wish to get to and beyond. The next thing we need to think about is the tide that's going to affect us while we're travelling from this point to this point. Now very quickly, if we measure this distance, we can see that it's roughly 10 nautical miles, and our boat today is going to be travelling at 12 knots. So it's going to take probably just under an hour to get from here to here. So we need to worry about 1 hour's of tide. The hour's tide that's going to affect us is going to be flowing at 293 true at 2.9 knots, so it's quite a strong tide. Now taking 293, we simply dial up 293 on our plotter. So 293. We set this down on our chart. Remember lining up the arrows and the lines with the north going lines on the chart. We want to put the outside edge of this plotter lined up with our starting point and then bring it in line like so. We then draw a line going in direction 293, and you can see I'm actually drawing across land, and for this construction it doesn't really matter because we're not going to go there, we're just using this method to tell us which direction to go in. And that's the direction, and it's 2.9 nautical miles, so over an hour, 2.9 knots of tide over an hour. It's going to take us 2.9 nautical miles, so it's quite a distance. We mark that distance off again here. To tidy things up, we'll just rub out the excess line on this tidal vector, and so that we know what we're dealing with here, if we come back to it or we get disturbed or someone else has to look at the chart, we draw 3 arrows on it as we have done before to notify that that's the tidal vector. The next step of our process is the bit that is often done incorrectly and is unique to course to steer. You'll remember that the boat we're on is going to be travelling at 12 knots, so in 1 hour it's going to travel 12 nautical miles. So we set our dividers against the scale to 12 nautical miles. Now once we've done that, we put the one end on the end of the tidal vector and we arc out just as if we were using a compass the other end until it crosses this line we drew before. Now notice it hasn't by chance hit this point here, but that doesn't matter at all, it's very unlikely to. Once we've done that, we can use a pencil to mark this point. And that's where we'd expect to be after 1 hour. Now what we do is use a straight edge, one end at the end of the tidal vector. Note I'm not joining it to this point, I'm joining it to the point I've just arced off. And you can see that I've drawn that line there. It's gone between the end of the tidal vector and the line where we arced off the 12 nautical miles a moment ago. To finish our work off with the correct notation, we put 2 arrows on this line here to signify that this is the ground track. This is the line we actually wish to travel along, and we put a single arrow on this line here to signify that that is the water track. And for us to travel along that line, we need to point the boat in that direction. That is our course to steer, and for that reason that's the line we need to now measure the bearing of. So in the reverse to the way we've done it before, we put the edge of our plotter along that line, and we turn the bezel on the plotter so the arrows are pointing north. And more precisely, we line the lines on the bezel up with the north lines on the chart, like so. We also note that this arrow is pointing in our direction of travel. By taking this, we can see that our bearing, our course to steer, is going to be 064 degrees true. To this, we can then adjust for leeway, variation and deviation if we need to, and you can see the further video to show here how to do that.